After you guys decided with an 88% win rate, today I'm going to show you guys how you can make your own Fortnite characters inside the Unreal Engine, and not only have them inside the Unreal Engine walking, running and doing whatever, you can also mix it with other characters to create some really interesting combinations. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. We have to start in Blender to get our characters first, because we need our characters to actually import them to the Unreal Engine. So in Blender you need one plugin, and one other plugin is basically optional. But the first plugin that we definitely need is Fortnite porting, and this will basically allow you to put in any character from Fortnite or anything from Fortnite in general into Blender and then export it obviously to the Unreal Engine. And just for those of you who are wondering, obviously I will leave everything down in the description for how to install the plugins, how to install Blender or the Unreal Engine. And also for those of you who are getting scared now that you also have to learn Blender and understand it, no, you basically just have to click a few buttons and it's it. It's nothing really learning Blender whatsoever. One thing which is super important when we import our characters is that there's basically two types of characters that you can import. There are characters that come as a whole, as a mesh. So for example, if we go here over to Cypher PK and take a skin, we're going to send it to Blender. So you can see that we get a character which is a one single mesh. So it's not like multiple meshes, it is one mesh, everything is meshed together. Then on the other hand, there are modular characters, which are a little bit harder to use, but they're obviously a little bit more versatile when it comes down to creating your own characters. When we click on the export and import options over here, you can see there's an option which is called merge skeletons. We don't want to have this option checked if we want to have modular characters. So we turn that off and we close this, and then we send Cypher again to Blender. You can now see that if we click on Cypher, we have the body as a mesh, we have the face or the hair and the mask as a mesh, and the head as well. So what we, for example, can do with this is obviously turning one of the few options off. So for example, if we want to turn off his hair, then we can do that and make Cypher bald. If you want to be a little bit more creative and if you want to have like exchange of body parts, which can be very helpful. But if you don't want to have modular characters, if you don't want to switch body parts out, you don't have to do this. You can use a single one. It will work the same way as shown with this one. So in our case, we want to use the modular character, which has multiple skeletons and multiple meshes. And we're going to export that now to the Unreal Engine. You can send something from Blender to Unreal Engine two ways. There is obviously the normal exporting, which if you go to your files and then click on export, you want to export it as an FBX file. But we're going to use the simple option to make it easier for us. We're going to use a plugin which is called Send to Unreal. This one basically allows you directly to send Blender files or Blender FBX to the Unreal Engine. You can obviously download the Unreal Engine from Epic Games in the Epic Games launcher. Just click on the little Unreal Engine tab, and if you have it and if you have the newest version like I am, you can just open the games folder over here and then go to third person. This one is what we need. It already has a bunch of animations for third person character, and since Fortnite is obviously third person, it works perfectly fine. So you can just quickly give it a name and press create. So that will then obviously launch you into the Unreal Engine, and technically you can already play here and have fun with the third person character that they give you, but we obviously want to replace the skin with Cypher. The first thing we want to do is, if we use the Send to Unreal plugin, is that we want to go into our edit options over here, and then we go to the project settings, and in our project settings we look for Python. Alright, so if we're inside Python, what we want to do here is go down to the enable remote executions and enable this box. This will make sure that Blender can actually execute inside the Unreal Engine. Then we can quickly close this. There's one more thing that we have to do here, and that is go into our plugins, and then we have to look for script. So if we found script, we go down to the script plugin, and we have to enable that as well. You have to restart the Unreal Engine after that, and after that you're completely fine to use Send to Unreal. Why this is important to do is because on every new project that you create, these options by default are disabled. So every time you create a new project in Unreal, this will be disabled and you cannot use Send to Unreal. So now we have everything set up, and now we can import Cypher to the Unreal Engine. Once back in Blender, all we have to do is go to Pipeline, go to Export, and then Send to Unreal. We can do that immediately, but I like to actually give the folders a name, because they would just create random folders which are called untitled, which is kind of random, and I don't like that. So what we're going to do is just name this folder Cypher. So we can click save and then just send it to Unreal. And once back in the Unreal Engine, you will see that there will be a little thing popping up, and it will basically import everything. And now we have a little folder over here which is called Cypher with all the assets that we just imported. These skins will not have any materials on. We have to apply them later. We'll show you that in a second. But first of all, the most important thing is actually make Cypher work and have them actually properly work in the game. Alright, so I quickly renamed them, and they're now a little bit more easier to identify. But now we can actually already technically play with Cypher. It will not look perfect by any means, but what you have to do is go into your third person, then you go into blueprints, and this one is the character that you can play around with. So this one is the model. And if you click on here, you go to viewport, and then you have your character over here. You can just simply replace this with the Cypher character. So we're going to look in for Cypher, and we're going to choose his body. Obviously, since there's multiple ones, we only have his body without head and hair, but you can technically just press compile and then safe. So obviously he will be only in A pose, and he will be floating a little bit, and does not have any movements, but you can technically play it. But obviously you want to have a fully working Cypher and not only one that is just floating in A pose. So the first thing we want to do is create an IK rig. For an IK rig, we right click into this empty space here, go to animations, go to IK rig, and then select IK rig. Here we can now select the character, so Cypher in our case. We want to select the body in this case. We can also make sure that we rename this correctly, so name it Cypher IK, and now we have the Cypher IK. In here is probably the hardest part out of all of the parts that we ever were going to do with this, and that is actually naming all the bones and making sure that they're all chained up together so they can actually work with the animations. There's one little trick which will make this so much easier for you, because what we're going to do is we're going to retarget the body from Cypher to the Unreal mannequin, which already has all the animations. So the next thing you want to do is go into your characters. So what we want to do to make this a lot easier for us is we're going to make sure that we're going to find our mannequins that we want to retarget to. So we're going to go to the mannequins, characters, mannequins, go to rigs, and in here you will find the IK mannequin rig. So this is the one for the normal Unreal Engine 5 character, which already comes with the rig, so you don't have to set up anything here. It is perfectly fine and already exists. So you can go here and just click on this. So now you basically have the same thing as for our Cypher character, but with the Unreal Engine mannequin, it already has everything set up. So this will make it a lot easier because we can already see everything that we need for this character or for our character to work and perfectly fit onto this character and basically copy his animations. So we're going to leave that open, and then we also open our Cypher PK here, and now we have both of them, and we can just look in between those two and basically just copy them one by one. We're going to go in here and look for the same bone that is named root on the side over here. So we can see this one is named root. So if we go back from Cypher to our mannequin, which we are going to use as a reference, you can see that root over here is already set up. So chain name is root, the starting bone is root, and also the end bone is root. So we're going to make sure that we do the same thing in Cypher as well. To make this as easy as possible, you can either go to this side over here and then add a new chain, or you can go over here, which will be easier in a few seconds. You will see that, right click and then click new retarget chain from selected bones. And since this is already named perfectly, we can just click OK, no goal, and we have our first chain set up. So for example, the next one is the spine. So for the spine, we have 5 bones which we need to chain together. You can see that in the mannequin, these bones are from spine 1 to spine 5. So we have to do the exact same thing in Cypher. So what we're going to do now is go into the first spine, and then we're going to shift click onto spine 5, and we're going to right click on them and then retarget the bones, press OK, no goal, and then we have them set up. So you can see they're all lined up perfectly fine, and we're good to go. Alright, so now comes the only thing that is a little bit more complicated, but also not really hard to do at all. The rest is just a little bit tedious. But we go back into a normal character here to the mannequin, and we see that pelvis has the name retargeted roost. But we cannot find it down here, nothing is called pelvis, and we basically have to do that for our character as well. The way how you do that is you're going to add a new solver here. I'm going to go to full body IK. So we want to click on our full body IK, and you can see that it says missing root bone. We're going to click on that, and we click on our pelvis, right click on the pelvis, and then we're going to set bone on selected solver. So now it says missing goes. We come to that in a second. There's one last thing missing on the pelvis, and that is we actually have to set it to the retargeted root, as you can see over here. So we're going to right click again and then set to retargeted root. Perfect. Now you can see that we have missing goals, and we basically now need IK goals. So you can see them over here in this character. These are the IK goals. These were basically the main thing that moved the different bones. So you can see if I wiggle this around, you can see that all of the arm and all of the rest that is targeted to that moves with it. So how do we create these goals? It's fairly simple. We basically go to the same bones that are in the IK mannequin. So for example, hand right on this side. So we're going to look for hand right or hand left in this case. And we're going to click on a new IK goal. So right click on the hand, click IK goal. And now you can see that all of these that are connected are basically lighting up, and we can see that it worked. You now want to do the same thing with the other 3 IK goals. So the other hand and the 2 foot bones. So we're going to move on to the right hand, press new IK goal, and we have it set up perfectly fine. On the foot it's a little bit different because they're for whatever reason renamed. I'm not 100% sure why they're renamed, and but I would just like stick to having the same names as they have, which just makes it a lot easier in the end. They're actually set on the ball, not on the foot directly, but on the ball bone, which is like the tip of the toe here. So we're gonna look up for the same thing here. So we're gonna make sure that we find the ball. Instead of having the IK goal on the foot, we want to have it on the ball here. So press new IK goal, and then we can actually rename that to make sure that everything is named the same as in our character over there as well. And then we obviously want to do the same thing with the other foot as well. So click on the ball, make it an IK goal, and then name it foot. So now we have all the IK goals set up, and you can see now that the body solver is now accepting it. It doesn't say any errors or anything. So now we come to the last part, which is probably the most annoying part in this whole thing. By the way, you can do these steps in any order, basically. You don't have to do them like I do, but I just want to show you guys how these work. You now have to make every chain that this character has basically in the Cypher character as well. You don't have to do any chains. For example, the fingers doesn't need to technically be there, but having the main ones like the arms and the legs should be a minimum that you have. So you don't really need like left thumb, middle index or whatever. You don't 100% need them, but obviously it makes the animation smoother. So what you now have to do here is make sure that you have the same thing as in the mannequin over here. So left arm, upper arm left to hand left, and then the hand goal should be applied as well. So to keep it simple, I would only target the ones that are actually highlighted, and the other ones are basically not super important. Besides the head is obviously important as well. So for the head, you're just going to do the same thing. Select all of them at once and then name this head, because for whatever reason it's actually named head and not neck. And then no goal, and then you have it in here. And then for the clavicle, you want to do the same thing. Create new target. Clavicle is alone, so we're gonna name this, and then we should be good to go. It's pretty important that you name them correctly in the same one as they're named in here. It is not needed, but it will help the automatic system that it has in place for retargeting to just detect it faster, and you don't have to do anything manually. So make sure that you stick to basically the same names. Name it right leg and name it right leg in Cypher as well. And then for the upper arm left, we're gonna select all of these. Upper arm, lower arm, click press here, new target. And then left arm is already correct. We can skip the goal, but it will automatically apply the goal, so it doesn't really matter. And then you want to basically do that for every single bone that is in here. You want to do it also for Cypher. Right clavicle, make sure that's set up. No goal, arm, hands, new target chain is already correct. Skip goal, we already assigned. Then you want to go to the foot, select all of them, chain, leg, skip goal. It's selecting the goal, and select all of them, and then a new retarget, right leg, skip. And now you have the ones that are important, which will make the character work. It will not look perfect. There's a lot of bones which are missing here. For example, the ones which like twist the arms are missing, but you don't need them to make them somewhat look decent. So if you just want to stick with these, you can leave it there. It will work, but it will not look perfect. So now we go back to our folder where we have our IK rig, and we can go click here again, animations, go to IK rig again, and now we need a retargeter. So in the retargeter, we're gonna select the IK mannequin. So we're gonna name the Cypher retarget just to keep a nice name, and if you have multiple ones, just make it easier for you to find it. And we click on it. So now you get greeted with this window where you can see our Unreal Engine mannequin. And if we now click any of the animations here, you want to click mainly the ones which are called MF or MM. You can see that the mannequin obviously has the animations. These are obviously made for the mannequin. The idle, jumping, it all works perfectly fine. But this obviously already exists, and we want to have our Cypher actually do the same actions. So what we're going to do is go to our target IK asset, and then we're going to select our Cypher IK rig, which we just created. This will then load in the Cypher IK rig with the Cypher mesh, and you can see it's basically merged into each other. We can quickly fix that. If we go a little bit down here, you can see that we can reset the offset and scale. So I think for Cypher, we're going to do a 1.07, I think is fine. Should be about the right size. And then we want to also put a little bit to the side here. Do the camera a little bit. So now that we have Cypher in here, we can actually already see the animations on Cypher. Obviously without a head, we fix that later. But you can see if we press any of the animations that work for the mannequin over here, for example, the forward run, Cypher is already running, which is super cool, and we can technically already like just export it as we want to, and then we have a running animation for Cypher. So there's one last thing which is super important, and is the chain mapping. This one will basically be correct all the time, and you can just click auto map chains if you use the correct namings. But if you don't use the correct namings, or if you use the different characters, these might get a little bit confused, and the auto detection doesn't do it correctly. You can always select them here manually. So for example, the spine should always be on the spine, so they basically chain perfectly together. For example, most of the times you will have the clavicle be on the right arm or something, and then it will basically look a little bit weird on the animation. So for example, if we now play an animation, like for example the run, you can see that the one arm is a little bit off and doesn't look correct. So if you have any problems with that, if any animations look a little bit too odd, then make sure that you go to the chain mapping and correct these if possible. But if you followed the tutorial along, you should be perfectly fine and should have a perfectly working Cypher, which has the exact same animations as the Unreal Engine mannequin. From here on, you can basically just select all the animations that work, so all of these which are called MF and MM, and just export the selected animations. You can put them in whatever folder you want. So for example, in our case, we want to put them in a Cypher character, and we also want to name them Cypher, so we know that are the specific Cypher animations. So now you can see that we have all the animations here. It's perfectly fine. And we can technically already use these animations. If we go back to our third person character and then go to blueprints, our character, and we're going to go back in here, make sure that we have Cypher. So we're going to look for Cypher, we have the mesh, and then we use animation assets. We can already use the Cypher assets. So for example, if you want to use running, Cypher is already running, and we can compile and save. And if we now start the game, you can see that we have a running Cypher. It obviously doesn't stop when we stop or jump when we jump, but it is somewhat working. But now let's make it correctly. We could technically create this from scratch, but since we want to do this easy and as simple as possible, we can just copy the one from the character that already exists. So we're going to go into our characters, we're going to mannequins, and this time we're going to click on animations. Here you can see the two animation blueprints that are given by the characters. With the main one, they're both the same basically, so you can choose whatever you want here. And then we want to right click on the character, then retarget animation assets, and then click on here. And we're going to select our Cypher retarget. You can see now that Cypher is getting retargeted to the blueprint. Same thing here, we can rename it Cypher again, so give it a prefix, and we can just we can technically also change the we can also change the location, so we make sure that everything is in the same folder, and press retarget. And now we see that we have a Cypher blueprint. So this will actually now our now only running Cypher to actually do everything that we give them as inputs, and the same thing as the Unreal Engine mannequin would do. So we're going to select animation blueprints here, and then we're going to look for the Cypher ABB Mani. And then we can now already see that Cypher is idling. It looks already a little bit more alive, even without a head, than before. It's just running, and we can save that. Now we can actually go into the game and press play, and we can see that Cypher is now actually standing still. It's not just running. However, there's one thing which is still odd, and that is, yeah. There's one more thing which we have to do, and you can do it in two different ways. I'll show you the easiest way, which might not be the most correct way, but it works for now, and the other way is a little bit more complicated and just takes too much time to explain it right now. But we want to obviously have Cypher remove his legs, even though that might look funny. You know, you have to change that, sadly. What we're going to do is go into our Cypher. We want to select our blueprint, which is always the one with the little corner here, and it also says animation blueprint. We're going to open that up. And in here, we want to go to our anim graph. This one is basically where everything is set up to work like it's supposed to work. And what we can do here is just select these three nodes here, and we're going to move them down a little bit, and we basically leave them out. I will not fully remove them because technically you need them. There's a better way to fix that, but this is the easiest way. So what we're going to do now is just compile, save, and now if we go back into the game, you can see that Cypher is working exactly as it's supposed to do. Obviously still without a head, but it's doing its job. To add the head and the hair is also super simple. All we have to do is click on the add component over there. So we're going to basically have an option of different things that we can add to the character, and we want to look, you can time that in here, for a skeleton mesh. The skeleton mesh should be named the same as the thing you want to add. So for example, we want to have hat, and we also need to make sure that it's directly under the component, so it's linked to it. Okay, so next thing we want to do is obviously also add the hair. Same thing, add a skeleton mesh, we name that hair, and then the same thing, make sure that the hair is also a child of the main mesh that you're using. So the next step here is actually adding the meshes for the head and the hair. So we're going to click on the head, going to make sure that we find the head mesh here. So it's obviously a little bit offset, but that doesn't matter right now. And same thing for the hair and the mask, we're going to add that as well. So now you can see that the body is not really connected to the head and the hair, which we're going to fix right now. We're going to go to our construction script over here, and we're going to drag a line from here. So this is your only blueprint and coding you technically have to do here. And you have to type in a set leader. pose. So you get multiple options here. You want to do it with any of the one that is not the mesh. So the mesh is obviously the main thing that we want, but we want the targets to be obviously the head and the hair. So we're going to just select the head. You can see the head is already targeted here. We're going to drag and drop from this option over here. And we're going to set the main mesh, the body of the character, we're going to set that as a leader pose. It's always the leader pose. The main thing that has the skeleton and everything is always the leader pose. And same thing for the hair. We're going to drag that in here and put it to the target. So obviously, main mesh is the body, and hair and head. That has to basically do the same thing as the body. And now if we press compile and save, and we go back to our viewport, you can see that everything works together and works perfectly fine. And in Blender, if you only selected one mesh, so you had only one big mesh without having the head and the hair separated, you already had the animations working before. So you can see it's basically the same step, but with adding the leader pose to it, which then will allow you to, for example, put in different heads, or depending on how good you are with Blender, you can also technically add more stuff to it as well. So the last thing that we obviously now have to do is just add the materials to it. And basically now what you have to do is make sure that you correct the right texture with the right node. So for example, we have the body over here. So we're going to look at what looks like a body. I think this one is the body. It even says the body. So the default material comes in here. And technically that would already work, and Cypher would already have a texture on his body. So we go in here, you can see it is there, but it doesn't look super beautiful. There's obviously a few more nodes that we have to add as well. So going in here, so for simplicity reasons, I will leave the VFX and the metallic, or technically it's not only metallic, out, but you can just add the normal one. Going to connect that to normal, and also the spatula, and select that here. And now Cypher does look a lot nicer. And once you set up all the materials, you have a working Fortnite character in your game, and it does look pretty cool. And for the last and final one, if you, for example, want to switch out Cypher's head with Jonesy's head, so I just imported Jonesy as well, so we have Jonesy's head here, you can just go into your blueprints, go here to Cypher, and then instead of having Cypher's head, you can just replace it with a Jonesy's head. Obviously, this will most likely not perfectly fit. So, for example, you can see that the head is obviously clipping a little bit off the t-shirt here. So you can technically solve that two ways. Either you go into Blender and then basically remodel it a little bit, or you can just rescale a little bit in the Unreal Engine. Obviously, this will not be the most perfect choice. But then you will have not the clipping here, and then obviously also we don't need the hair here, so we can technically just like move it away. And then we have Jonesy with Cypher's body, which does look a little bit weird. It looks like Cypher's a little bit more buff than Jonesy, but if you can start the game, you can see that we now have Cypher's body with Jonesy's head. And let me know if you want to see more Unreal Engine tutorials, and I will see you guys back in the next one.